Okay, afternoon everyone. First of all, just a massive thank you for everyone that's joined the call. I'm just going to introduce sort of the concept of today. So some of you may have seen my face before. My name's Adrian. I oversee our partnership at the Foundation with St Mary's University. As some of you will know, we actually do deliver our own degree with St Mary's University in football coaching and development. But this webinar is certainly not sort of just a generic overview of that particular course or anything like that. This is a more generic workshop that Meg's put together to touch on what you can see on the screen there: student finance, university life, and personal statements, and things that may well be quite high up on your priority list at the moment. So I'll hand over to Meg to get started.
Thank you so much, Adrian. So yeah, as Adrian said, my name's Meg and I work at St Mary's University in Twickenham. And today I'm going to talk through student finance, student life, and personal statements. So these are the different things I'm going to cover today, and I appreciate that it's a lot. So the Q&A box is there if you want to ask me any questions as we go through. So please do drop some questions in there for me. So the first two sections will be on student finance. So I'll talk about what loans are available to you if you decide to go to university. I'll then talk about applying to Student Finance England and repayments. And I know that repayments and how will I afford to go to university is such a big concern and question that a lot of you may have. So again, please feel free to ask me as many questions about that as possible. It's not the most exciting topic, so it probably will only take me 10-15 minutes. So yeah, I'll do those first. And then I will do a student life quiz on Kahoot. So that will cover things such as teaching methods at university, accommodation at university, as well as student finance, to make sure that you're paying attention. And then we'll take like a 5-10 minute break, because that should take us up to about 50 minutes. And then I'll talk about personal statements. So if you're a year 13 and you're planning on handing in your personal statement in the next week or so, or you have a draft with you, that would be the perfect kind of 20 minutes for you. But let's get straight into it then. So what loans are available to you if you study at university? So there are two main loans available through Student Finance England. And you might see that phrase Student Finance England quite a lot because they are the government body which awards student loans, okay? The two loans that they offer, the ones that you'll hear about the most, are the maintenance loan and the tuition fee loan. So the tuition fee loan is the loan which pays for your university fees year on year, whereas your maintenance loan pays for your living costs, or it helps support you with your living costs. So they're the two main ones that you'll see, and the ones that you'll be applying to or applying for after you've applied to university. So how does it work? So the tuition fee loan, as I said, pays for your course fees for the year on year, for if you do like 3 years or 4 years. For a full-time degree in England, that costs £9,250, which sounds like a lot, but the government loan will pay for that completely. If you do a part-time course, it's a bit less, as you're only doing half the year. And then if you do a foundation degree, such as the Chelsea FC one, the fees will differ. So depending on what course you're applying to, make sure you check out the university website that you're applying to, as the government will ask you, like, okay, how much do you need, essentially? So make sure you do your research and you find out how much your course will cost. But they're the standard fees in England. So how this works, you don't see this money. This is the best bit about this loan. You apply for it, the government approves it, and then the government pays the university directly. So your fees are paid year on year. You don't have to fork out £9,000 every year. The government does that for you, and that money never goes into your bank account. And you apply for it every year, and then it's just sorted. So you don't have to worry about this money after you've applied for it. So yeah, paid directly to the university by the government. Maintenance loan is a bit different. As I said, this one pays for your living costs. So this helps you cover your food, your rent, your bills, your books, and other university expenses. So if you're commuting to university, it's good to get out a maintenance loan because it'll help you with like train fares or car insurance and so forth. This one is paid into your bank account by the government, so you do see this money. You're paid in 3 installments over the year. So you'll get a sum in September time when you start, then December, January, and then in April or May. So it helps you through like the kind of 3 terms at university, or the 2 semesters at university. These installments vary depending on your household income. So household income is the amount that your parent or your carer makes, essentially, and then they test that and decide how much they will give you. And I'll get onto that in a minute because that gets a bit more complicated. But this is just an idea of how much you might be entitled to depending on where you study and where you live at university for the maintenance loan. So if you live in London and you study in London and you're living away from home, you will get a maximum of up to £12,000. So that's quite a lot in comparison to if you live outside of London and away from home, where you only get up to £9,000. The reason for that is obviously that London is a lot more expensive to live in. And I know that a lot of students might not want to study in the city because they think, oh, I won't be able to afford that. But the government subsidises you for that. So they know that it's more expensive to live away from home and in London. Either decide to live at home and stay with the parents, absolutely okay. You can still get a maintenance loan, but it will be lower. So you can get up to £7,000. Okay, I hope that's making sense so far. So when I talked about household income, this is a lot of numbers to look at, so don't freak out, I'll talk you through this. So as I said, the maximum amount that you can get if you study in London, this is a year old, there wasn't an updated version, but you can get £12,000 now, if you can see in the top right-hand corner. The way you get the maximum loan is if your parents make £25,000 or under. Okay, and as you can see, if you go down, if your parent or carer is making over £70,000 a year, you'll get less. And the reason for that is because the government would assume that your parents can support you more than maybe parents that make less money, in the most simple terms of putting it. Okay, so if we look at another example, just to re-talk you through that. So if you decide to live at home and study at university and your parents make under £25,000, you'll get the maximum amount there. But again, if they make more, you'll get lower, okay? So it's essentially mean tested against what your parents earn. And there is a way to go on the student finance website and kind of have a look and get an estimate of what you might be eligible for. That's useful to do when you're trying to budget for what you might need to save for university and stuff, okay? But they're not the only two ways of getting money when you go to university. So of course you should apply for maintenance and tuition fee loan if you can. But you can look at scholarships. So if you're good at a sport, you might a university might give scholarships for that for elite athletes. If you have really good academic results, there might be scholarships for you. Some are subject specific and they're normally quite competitive. So have a look as soon as you can once you apply to the university to see what you might be entitled to. Same with bursaries. So these are normally kind of linked to personal circumstances and often household income. So if you need additional support, the university might have options for that as well. So again, it's all about doing your research and checking out the university websites that you're applying to. Further to that, there's other ways still of making money while you're at university. I've already talked about parental contribution. So have that conversation with your parents, like, okay, I can afford to pay my fees, but I might need some help, paying my rent, for example. So just have that conversation with them if appropriate, if you know that you're not going to get the maximum maintenance loan. Hardship funds. So if you're at university and you think you're doing okay, but suddenly you don't have money, like you had to pay out a big bill that you weren't expecting because life happens. Universities do have student services where they can give out hardship funds. So you're never alone, like you're never stuck if you suddenly run out of money or you blow it all on freshers. Like they will help you out with making sure that you know how to budget, and they can give you a grant if you're eligible for it. If you have a child, you might be entitled to dependence allowance, or if you have a disability, even like such as dyslexia, and you need some money to help buy like a laptop or a recorder, something to help you succeed in your studies, that's there as well. Again, talk to the student services teams at the universities you're applying to, and they can walk you through applying for all that different stuff. You also have part-time employment. So when I did my undergraduate degree, I worked at H&M for 16 hours a week. We normally say that you shouldn't work over 16 hours because if you're doing a full-time degree, you need to treat that as a full-time job. Like that's your priority in many ways. So if you do decide to work whilst you're at university, try and keep to 16 hours and have a look what's around in the area. Like if you're, let's say, coming to St Mary's, you have Kingston upon Thames around the corner with so many retail shops and stuff that you can work in, or pubs and bars. And then you have things like charities and trusts and savings. You don't want to go down the traditional route of getting a loan and so forth. Okay, so that was a really, really brief overview of what's available to you. Does anyone have any questions thus far? Because I know that is a lot to take in. I'll give you 30 seconds or so to write in the question box if you have anything, and then I'll just move on. No pressure, there's no questions thus far. I'll be impressed if I've managed to explain that well. Doesn't seem to be anything. Okay, good. I shall move straight on. I'm glad that that makes sense thus far. So this is about applying to student finance and how the repayment system works, okay? So Student Finance England, as I said, is who you're applying to when you get your loan. And this is a map that they have on their website. They have incredible resources. If after this presentation, you're still like, this is a lot of information to take in, I'm not sure, I'm still not sure whether I can afford to go to university, have a look at their website, have a look on the student room, or even on UCAS, and they'll explain a lot of it for you as well. They have some great resources. So basically, after you've decided that you want to go to university and college, you will gather the information that you need and apply for Student Finance England via the government website. Make sure you have all the details you need when you do it. So if you're applying to university this year and you submit your application on the 29th, make sure that you start doing this process. This is like the next important thing on your journey to going to university. You also need to make sure that your parent or your partner sends in their household income as soon as possible, because as I mentioned, that lets you know how much you'll be entitled to, and you need to know that as soon as possible so you know how to budget before you go to university. I didn't mean to move on, sorry. So just to recap that. So step 1, apply through Student Finance England, okay? How you do this, as I said, you go on the government website and you should apply early. So as I said, you need to know as soon as possible how much you're entitled to so you can budget to go to university. The main thing is you don't need to have confirmed a place at university or colleges to apply. So if you haven't chosen what your firm choice is, or you haven't received an offer from your firm choice yet, that's okay, still apply. Just put down what your preferred choice university is. And if you don't get into that university for whatever reason, or you change your mind, once you enroll at university, that sorts itself out anyway. And you can speak to Student Finance if you have any concerns. Step 2, send all the evidence in. As I said, get it done as soon as possible. Make sure your parent or carer sends in their household income so you know how much you're entitled to. I mentioned earlier a calculator, which you can find on the government website. So if you go onto Google and type in Student Finance Calculator government, you can work out how much maintenance loan you might be able to get. So if you know roughly how much your parents make, or if you want to have that conversation with them, as they'll have to fill it out in the future anyway, if that's the route that you're going down, you can do that now. You can find out. And finally, your application will be assessed and then you're notified of the amount you receive. So it's like a 4-step process. You apply, you submit your evidence, and then you'll get a notification of how much you shall receive. So just get it done as soon as possible if you're going to university this year. Repayments, so the big one that I think a lot of people get concerned about, because I've mentioned a lot of big numbers, they have to pay £9,000 a year to go to uni, but actually what does that mean for you? So how do repayments work? So even though you're taking out 2 big loans, you're doing the maintenance and tuition fee loan, you don't have to start paying these back unless you're making £26,575 per year in England and Wales. And if you never make that much money, you never have to pay back the loan. It also is wiped after 30 years, unless you happen to pay it off or if the loan is cancelled. So in a roundabout way of saying this, it's one of the best loans you'll ever have. It doesn't affect your credit score, anything like that. And as I said, if you never make £26,000 a year, you never have to pay it back. And even after you start making monthly repayments, after 30 years, if you haven't paid it off, then it gets wiped anyway. Okay. And that begins on the April after you leave. So if you leave in September, you would start paying in April next year. Okay. So the way this works is you're taxed from your payslip, and it's usually less than the standard phone bill. So if you're working now, when you get your payslip from work, you might see that you've been taxed for national insurance, for example, if you're making over a certain amount. But there's a tax box on your payslip. It just comes out of there. You don't have to do anything. The government just do that for you. And I say it's less than the standard phone bill. So here's just an example from last year. Obviously, this figure, 25,000, is now 26,000, as I said previously. But if you don't make a penny over that, you don't pay back anything. Whereas if you make £33,000 a year, for example, you'd pay back £54 a month. Now that might seem like a lot, and your phone bill might not be that expensive. I might just be getting ripped off. But if you're making taking home £2,000 a month, £54 isn't that much, if that makes sense. So it's quite manageable. So even though the tuition fee loan is manageable to pay back and you don't have to think about it until you make over a certain amount, and it's such a small amount from your payslip, the one thing you do need to consider is where you live at university. You know, your maintenance loan is the main thing here. You need to make sure that you're budgeting and you have enough to get through the living costs at university. But in terms of paying tuition fees, I think it's completely manageable. Right. So again, that was a really brief overview of student finance. Does anyone have any questions? I'd be really surprised if there were no questions at all. Let's have a look. I'll give you a minute. And they're anonymous, so no, I won't like share them or anything. I'll just read them out. Any concerns that you might have about that? No? I'm impressed. That's good. A lot of you might have already heard about this anyway if you're going to university this year. But again, just feel free to ask me questions throughout if you have any. But now we're going to move on to something a bit more exciting. I will now go on to student life. As I said, there will be student finance questions in there. And as you all seem to be pros, you should know a lot of the answers to this. I actually do have a question coming, so let me just read that first. That's a really good question. So the question was, what if your parents are leaving the country when you go to uni? I actually don't know. That's a very specific example, but what I'll do is I will find out for you. If you do have any concerns that are quite specific like that, just get in touch with student finance. Actually, if you fill out the calculator, the one that I showed you, it will ask you a bunch of questions like, okay, do you live with your parents? Where are your parents? Like, they will have to go through all those things with you anyway. So yeah, but I will find out for you. I'll remember your name and see if I can find your teacher's email address. Okay, so let's move on to the student quiz. Do you all know how to use Kahoot? I hope you do. Let's have a look. Well, I'll share my screen. Perfect. Right. So the pin's coming up. So if you haven't used Kahoot before, you go to www.it and you type in that game pin. I'm going to turn off the music because I think it's the worst music in the world. So hopefully you can all see that.
Sorry, Meg, just before we, just while people are putting their names in, there's just a question that's been sent to us in the chat box to us as panelists. So do the tuition fees and maintenance loans get paid out in one?
Oh, that's a good question. So the tuition fee loan, as I said, you don't see that one. So it gets paid out at the same time, but you don't have to worry about it because it gets paid directly to the university. So it does get paid out in one, but you don't see the tuition fee loan. For the maintenance loan, it gets paid out at the same time, but it goes straight into your bank account. You don't get the full lump sum for the year. So let's say you were going to get £5,000 for the year. You'd get a third of that in September, a third of that in December, and a third of that in May. But you don't see the tuition fee loan. So it does get paid out at the same time is the answer to that question, but you don't have to worry about that money itself. You don't see that money anyway. I hope that makes sense. It's a good question. Okay. I'll wait another 30 seconds. You can join as I go through anyway. Okay. Perfect, I'll make a start. Okay, so yeah, this whole thing is on student life at university, as I said, and the first one is a practice question. So take a guess at this one. How many students do you think study at St Mary's University? Seven more seconds. Oh, 4 of you are right. Well done. Yeah, 5,000 students at St Mary's University. I won't talk too much about St Mary's, but we are a smaller university in comparison to others So it's a great community vibe at St Mary's, but well done. That was a good practice question. Right, so now what's going to happen, let's have a look at oh, bold falcon in first place, well done. So this first section is going to be in student life and teaching methods at university. So I'm going to show you definitions and you have to match them to the correct word, okay? So first one, a talk delivered to a large number of students on a particular subject or topic. Is that a lecture, a seminar, a tutorial, or a practical? A lecture, well done, all straight on it. Yeah, so a lecture is where you'll have a lesson with everyone on your course in your year on your degree. So it'll be a big lecture theatre, whether you're in a small class or a big class, everyone will be there and you'll be taught a specific topic for that week or for that module. Oh, Mystery Hen is moving up the leaderboard. Right, next one. A classic university in which a topic is discussed by a teacher and a small group of students. Is that a tutorial? Is it field work? Is it a module or a seminar? Yep, so it's a seminar. Most of you got that one right, well done. So a seminar is where after a lecture, your tutor might split you into smaller groups where you'll discuss that lecture in detail. So you might discuss the reading they've set for that week, but it's your chance to kind of show off to your peers and your lecturers like what you've read and what you found out. So where in a lecture you might just be sitting and listening for an hour, a seminar is a chance to actually talk to your friends and the people on your course. How are we doing? Oh wow, leaderboard change. Mystery Hen is at the top, well done. I love the random generated names. Okay, next one. When a student is assigned to a suitable job related to their degree, gaining work experience in their desired field, what's that called? Is that an audition, field work placement, or a practical? Yep, it's a work placement. So at certain universities, I know at St Mary's, depending on the degree you're doing, you might be able to do a work placement module, for example. So if you're studying law and you want to do a module in a work placement, we can organise that for you. And it means that you don't have to take a year out of your studies and do what's called a sandwich degree. You can just do a module in a workplace, which is really, really cool. And you get marked towards that. So it goes towards your degree. Other universities might do a year out, which is just as cool. So yeah, if you want to enhance your CV whilst you're at university, definitely have a look at what work placement opportunities are available to you. Oh, bold falcon coming back. Okay, next one. A one-to-one with a lecturer about a particular project, research study, or assignment. Is that a seminar, a tutorial, a lab work, or independent study? Yep, it's a tutorial, well done. So you might have tutorials at school or college now, where you'll go and speak to your teacher about a particular piece of coursework, or if you've got an exam coming up and you're concerned about stuff. It's exactly the same thing at university. In fact, a lot of my friends would just forget to go to tutorials and forgot they were there, which is really silly. Like if you're not sure about something or you do really badly on an assignment, you should absolutely go speak to your academic. And likewise, if you do really well, you need to make sure that you still go speak to your academics about it. You know, you're, like I've said, as I've gone through, you're paying to go to university, you're paying for their expertise and their help. So make sure when you find out who your academic tutors are, that you go and you speak to them when you've done a good piece of coursework. Nice, maintaining the lead there. Right, next one. Revision and research done by a student with some support from a lecturer but outside the classroom. Is this an interview? Is this field work? Is this independent study? Or is this an audition? You guys are quick, well done. And yes, well done, I got that right, independent study. So independent study is one of the largest, most important things at university. It's probably the most, I don't know, common or the most expected form of learning. So even though some practical degrees might have more contact time, and contact time is how much time you spend in the classroom. So if I did history, for example, so I only had 6 hours a week in my third year of lectures. And so the rest of my time was independent study. So if you do like a sport-based course, you might have more practical time, but you'll still be expected to kind of like if you're doing coaching, to design or plan lessons and so forth. So independent study is a really important thing at university. So if you're writing a personal statement, make sure you mention that you have that skill. Mystery hen is really zooming up in the front there, followed by amazing badger. Nice. Next one, usually a scientific hands-on activity which tests an idea and theory. Is it field work? Is it a practical? Is it a lecture, or is it lab work? Perfect, yep, it's lab work. So, I mean, field work, actually no one chose field work. Normally people get those two mixed up, so that's good. But I see why you put practical, because of course, if it's hands-on, then it's definitely a practical. So I'll accept that as a right answer as well. But yeah, lab work. So if you're doing like a scientific degree, you might have more hours in class during the week because you're actually in the labs, whether that's independently studying, doing stuff, or whether you have an assignment or an exam. Focused hamster. Nice, yeah, in second place, well done. And mystery hen has the highest answer streak of 7, well done. Right, next one. Work done by students to gain experience, data or knowledge through first-hand observation or practice. Is it a practical, independent study, observation, or field work? It's practical, yeah. So again, it could be field work, because if you're in the field, I guess you'll be observing or practicing something firsthand. So I feel like that's a bit of a red herring there, but yeah, a practical. So again, if you're doing a more practical degree, you'll do more practical things, of course. I didn't really have any practicals on my history course, apart from maybe like, no, actually I didn't have any. Oh, no change. So no need to answer this time. So they were the student, like the learning at university. I think I covered most of the different types there. Of course, if you're doing like a more bespoke degree that's very, very specific, they might have like additional ways of learning, but they cover most of them. And like, of course, if you're doing teaching, you would be in a school doing a work placement, or if you're doing acting and so forth, you'd be acting auditions and stuff. Okay, so at university, you'll have support from multiple teams, but how well do you know them? So this is about finance, support, and the Students' Union. And again, I'm happy to take questions about all this stuff, because I know that student life is probably the most exciting thing when you think about university. So this is a multi-select. If you had an issue with the way your course is being taught, who would you speak to in the first instance? Yep, so you could speak to all 3 of those people. I don't know if any of you know who the Vice Chancellor is, but he is like the principal of the university. So I'm sure at St Mary's, if you wanted to speak to our Vice Chancellor about a problem that you had, you could. But yes, you would either go to your lecturer, your academic tutor, or someone from the SU. So the academic tutor is someone that is assigned to you when you begin university, and they will be your academic tutor for the 3 or 4 years that you're at university. And if you have a problem, whether that's like to do with mental health or finance, what they'll do is they'll point you in the right direction of the people that can help. I've just reread the question, but if you had a problem with the way your course been taught, you could speak to academic tutor and tell them that you didn't like it. Again, with your lecturer, same thing. I put here from the SU because the SU are like your union, and if you have any issues at university, they're there to support you, like a workers' union essentially. So they have your back in most things, and they will be able to speak to the right person at university. So like senior leadership, and discuss with them if there's a big issue with the way that your course is being taught. Sorry, that got confusing as I read the question wrong, but well done. Mystery hen's still in the lead. Right, true or false? The Students' Union is a separate body to the university. So are they part of the university, or do they kind of stand alone? Nearly 50-50, yeah, so it's true, they are separate bodies. So as I just said, they are a union for you, and they will go up against the university if there's any issues that the students have. Normally it's not that serious, and like that rarely happens, but especially now at the moment, there's a lot of like students are unhappy during COVID, so they've gone to the Students' Union, who are speaking to the university to try and make change. So they have to kind of be separate in order to be able to fight for the students, if that makes sense. So they are separate and they are there for you if you have any issues, just to reiterate that. Still in the lead, well done. Right, next one. If you were having issues with your finances, who would you speak to in the first instance? Would you speak to the fees office, student services, wellbeing, or careers? Four more seconds. Student service is correct. So a lot of you put fees, understandably, but at university, the fees office is the people that manages like the university's like fees that are coming from you for when you pay your loans and stuff. So they don't necessarily help you with your finances per se, but actually just make sure you're paying them, which is the opposite of the support you would need in this instance. So student services have a finance team who can help you budget, who can talk you through hardship funds. They can talk you through like the disability allowance if you need extra support. So the student services team are the people that you would go to in that instance. And it's really important that when you're exploring universities and you're looking at open days, that you familiarize yourself with student services and all the like support they can offer, as they'll be really, really beneficial throughout your time at university. Amazing Badger. Nice. All right, next question. Multi-select again. If you were struggling with your mental health, who would you speak to? I kind of gave away this answer by answering it earlier on in my confusion, but would you go to the Students' Union, Student Wellbeing Team, lecturer, or academic tutor? Hey, well done. Yep, it's everything basically. So no matter at university, if you're struggling, speak to someone is all I can emphasize here. So Students' Union, again, they're so lovely at most universities that they will listen to you. They'll work out like how you can do things better, like how they can help. Student Wellbeing Team, obviously, as they have like counselling and they'll help you out there to make sure that you can talk to someone if you need to. And your lecturers and academic tutors, they won't counsel you per se, like that's not necessarily their role, but they will make sure that you do get the help and support that you need. So yeah, speak to anyone if you're struggling at university, essentially there. It's between Bold Falcon and Amazing Badger at the moment. Right, only first years can live in halls. Is that true or false? It's false, correct. So I think at most universities the same as St Mary's. So first years obviously prioritised for halls, as it's, you know, your first year at university, your chance to make friends. But if there's spaces available in your second or third year, you're more than welcome to apply. So we have people at St Mary's that are in their second and third year living on campus as well. I know that my brother, for example, lived on campus for 3 years and he loved it. So there is the option there if you don't decide that you want to move out. But for me, I found friends that I want to live with in my second and third year, and I also enjoyed that too. So completely up to you, but if you do want to stay in halls, that is a possibility. Amazing Badger is making a comeback with 3 in a row. Well done. Multi-select again. Which societies exist at a UK university? I can't even say that word. What that says society. Quidditch Society, Extreme Ironing Society, or Clapping Society? Which ones do you think exist at universities? This isn't just St Mary's, but universities across the country. Oh, I like that everyone would like to have a spontaneous, how do you say that word? That society. But yeah, so you can have a Quidditch society. Actually, loads of universities have Quidditch societies. So they play against each other, which is really, really cool. You might be thinking, how do they do that? But essentially they run around in rooms, obviously don't fly, but they have a golden snitch. So it's someone that dresses up as a furry, like orange person, and they have to like catch them, which is hilarious. Clapping society, yeah, they just get around and clap and are really happy, which is nice. And extreme ironing, so for example, you might like go onto a cliff and iron. There's loads, if you type that into Google, there's loads of crazy images, but the point here is if you go to university and you want to create a society, you can literally create one on anything that you want. So yeah, definitely get involved. If you have a hobby and your university doesn't have a society in that, just create it. You normally only need like 10 people or so to create a society and get funding. So yeah, no change. Which department would help you write your CV? Would the library help, the careers team, students union, or work placement department help? Careers team, correct. So the careers team would help you write your personal not your personal statement, your CV. They offer loads of support. At St Mary's, we also have like a long list of employers in the area that we know are good and trusted. So we always like post what jobs are coming up and so forth. But yeah, they will help you with, I don't know if you guys would use LinkedIn yet, but they would help you like design your profile on there as well. And they're also like available once you're alumni. So once you graduate from university, a lot of careers teams at universities are still there to support you. So yeah, there's great support at university if you want to get a job. Mystery Hen still in the lead. Someone's going to have to catch up with them. Another multi-select. Who should you go to if you need support writing coursework? So not a CV, but coursework. Would you speak to your academic tutor, a librarian, wellbeing, or the international team? Perfect. So your academic tutor, because they're your teacher and they are an expert in the field that they're teaching, they will be able to talk you through like exactly how, what's the proper format for your course. Because if you're writing, I don't know, a write-up for an experiment that you've done, it's going to be very different to doing an English or history essay. So they're always a good person to go to, especially for like the actual courses format for writing when it comes to like footnotes and everything. A librarian is also good. So at St Mary's, we have a team within the library who will help you if you're struggling like sentence structure, not really sure where to get started. They do good top tips. And again, most universities will have that service as well. Nice. I'm waiting for someone to reclaim the top spot. Multi-select. Who should you go to if you have an issue in your halls of residence? So your accommodation on campus. I think this is a photo from one of our halls of residence in one of our old houses, which is so cute. But yeah, you have senior resident, fees office, accommodation team, or finance team. Yep, senior resident and accommodation team. So your senior resident is the students that live on each floor. So there's one on each floor of university at St Mary's. And essentially they'll be the people that come around during freshers or during your move-in week and be like, hey, like come meet everyone. But they're there to support you having issues. Like they're your first go-to. If your senior resident is, I don't know, not very good, or you don't get along with them, or you have an issue with them specifically, you can go to the accommodation team. So they manage the senior residents essentially, but they can talk about bigger issues as well. So yeah. Focused hamster. Amazing Bear is back with an answer streak of 3. Well done. How much you know about student loans or how much university costs? So normally I don't give a student finance presentation before this quiz. So how much did I teach you earlier when you weren't asking me questions? Let's have a look. Okay, so we've got some very competent people. That makes me really happy. Okay, that's good. And I would be surprised if you didn't need more information. I remember it took me a while to get my head around a lot of this stuff. So these next questions will be on student finance. So we'll see how much you remember, and hopefully I can re-clarify some things if you weren't sure earlier. So how much does university cost per year if you're studying full time? Can you remember what the figure was? Fantastic, yeah. The 6,001 is probably part-time, roughly around there if you were thinking of that. But yeah, full-time is £9,250 per year. Focused hamster has the highest answer streak of 4. Well done. Right, true or false? I had to pay my fees up front at the beginning of each year. So yeah, this is false. So just to remind those who might not have understood this earlier, and it is confusing because they are paid at the beginning of the year. You don't have to pay them. So the government pays them and they pay them over the course of the year. And as I said again, you don't see that. So tuition fee loans, just to recap, you apply for and then they are paid directly to the university by the government. Okay, so you'll never have to fork out that £9,000 yourself unless you decide to pay independently, which is completely up to you. Nice. Answer streak of 5 now, very impressive. True or false? You have to start paying your student loans back straight after you finish university. Is that true or false? That's false. So I think the next question, so I don't want to give you a spoiler, but no, that is false. You don't. And some of you might remember how much you have to be earning to start paying back your, yes, how much you have to begin to be earning before you begin paying back your student loan. Who can remember? So you don't begin paying straight away. Just to remind you, you pay after you make, £26,000, £26,575 per year. So until you're making that in a job per year, you don't have to pay a penny back at all. And as I said, if you never make over that, you never have to pay. And after 30 years, it's wiped anyway. Okay. Best debt, you'll be in for 30 years, I guess. Creative Dove has the highest answer streak of 5. Well done. Next one. How many years after university do you have to pay back your student loan for? I've just told you the answer to that one. I expect full marks. Perfect. Well done. 30 years. And final question, which I think is a poll. Nope. Where would you go to apply for your fees and maintenance loan? So I gave you the website address at the beginning of this session. Can you remember it? Yeah, the government website. Well done. Yeah, the blue answer looks very familiar, so fair enough. But yeah, the government website is where you apply and that's where you go to. Okay. Finally, so how are we all feeling about student life, finances and services at university? Okay, that's good. Well, I'm now going to take some questions on anything that you've just heard there, because I've talked a lot, or for 45 minutes now, on student finance, from learning and everything. So if you would like to ask me some questions, please do now. Let me just stop showing my screen for a moment. Oh, we should see the leaderboard actually. That would be unfair if I didn't show you that. 1 second. Let's have a look who came in first. So in third place, we had Amazing Badger. Well done. Second place, we had Bold Falcon. And in first place, drumroll, Mystery Hen, who maintained the lead throughout. Very impressive. Well done, everyone. I think fourth place was Focused Hamster. And I love that. I love that name. Okay, let me just end showing my screen from there. Okay, so do we have any questions? Okay, first question. Is living at university cheaper / better than living at a house out of uni? It's a good question. So for me, I found in my second year, I found it cheaper because if you can find a good deal, then, it'll be better than university accommodation. So at St Mary's, because our accommodation includes your food, it can be slightly higher in comparison to other universities' accommodation. So you're paying a bit more per week. Whereas in my second year, my third year, I found somewhere where I was renting a room for £100 a week, and it was a really nice situation. So obviously paying £400 a month for rent is a lot cheaper than a lot of university accommodation in London. So it really depends on your circumstance. So again, have a look how much maintenance loan that you're going to be getting, and can you what's your maximum rent that you can afford, if that makes sense. But it's really circumstantial depending on what the packages are that the universities offer. But a good thing to do will be look at the university website, have a look at what their cost is for accommodation, and then have a look on Student Room or Rightmove to see what rooms are available outside of uni. But of course, in your first year, you might want to just have the experience of living in halls with other students, which is completely understandable. And if you find it's hard to manage your money in the first year after doing that, you then have the option to either move home or to move out with friends and do a house share, which could work out a lot cheaper because there'll be more of you living in a house, if that makes sense. So yeah, really, really circumstantial. Is there any other questions about that?
Meg, I'll just ask a question. Obviously, my uni time was a long time ago, but how do you kind of work out what the best unis are for the best courses? Because obviously unis offer pretty much the same courses to everyone else. There might be some differences, but how do you kind of work out the best uni to go to for your course?
That's a really good question. So I'd probably give you 2 top tips for that. So the first one is, as you said, if you're trying to choose a course and multiple universities might do that same course, the modules might be different and the facilities at that university might be different. So, you know, you have universities like St Mary's or Loughborough who are huge for sport and will have incredible world-class sporting facilities. And, you know, that might be your most important factor for studying that course. You know, you might want to have exposure to that. Or if there's a specific topic on the subject that you love that you want to study, you might want to double check all the modules on the different courses and make sure everything you love is actually on that course. So they're like the 2 main things you should think of, I think, when deciding which course is for you. There was another thing I was going to say. But yeah, definitely break down the modules. I don't think people always remember to do that. I know when I chose my degree, history, I was like, oh, all history degrees are the same, but they're absolutely not. Like, there's so many different topics that are covered. And location's the main thing as well. Like, do you want to be in a city? Do you want to be in the countryside? Do you want to be by the beach? Do you want to be in Scotland? I think maybe just write down what your main priorities are for being at university. Oh, and the other thing is, I can put some links in the chat, but check out statistics and league tables. And I don't mean just check out one league table and that's fine, but have a look at everything from, okay, so I like both these courses, they look pretty similar, but what's the student experience like at this university? So having a look what students think about that university is also really, really important. So yeah, it's not just about choosing 5 identical courses. There's so many like differences. So prioritize what's most important to you, I guess, is my top tip there. And then go away and have a look at what meets that criteria that you set yourself, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just think it's probably a question that a lot of the students would have. But if you could give us some resources, we can obviously put that out to the students as well. That'd be brilliant.
Absolutely. I wrote something recently actually for students about like how to look at league tables, like what's the most important thing to look for, and there's some UCAS resources that I can send across to everyone, if that would be useful.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Meg.
I think as well, just to add to that a little bit would be, and Meg, you touched on it, the student's view on the course, and the reality is, to all of you on the call, you may well be looking at different courses and you may jump on to open days and webinars that give you an overview of each individual programs. You know, I run some for our program. The reality is, I'm not going to tell you our program's not good if it's not good, for example. So, and every institution is going to tell you, you know, how amazing their program is. The reality is the best way to find out is to look at something, you know, league tables, etc., on the actual, what the students on that program have said. That's sort of that first-hand information. And students each year do something called National Student Survey, where they sort of rate their course against a number of different metrics. So one, for example, would be you know, student satisfaction, for example, and things like that. So yeah, go ahead and sort of compare across student experiences across the different programs that you're interested in, would be my bit of advice. And if you can't find, for example, some of that information, feel free to ask the institutions if they're happy to share it.
Yeah, that's perfect advice. Completely agree with that. Does anyone have any other questions? In a minute, I'm going to give you a 5-minute break if you're a year 13 staying on for the next 20 minutes. I also need to go grab some water myself. But does anyone have any further questions? Honestly, it could be anything about student life. I studied at uni for 5 years, so I'm only recently removed from that. So I'm happy to answer anything appropriate, obviously. Nothing? Okay. How many year 13s do we think are staying on, Adrian? Do you know?
Can't say I do. I know James is doing register, but I don't know if he'd know who's.
That's
No,
fine.
I think even if they're not year 13s, I'd encourage them to stay on and potentially listen to it, because it will be their turn, and it will come around a lot quicker than they probably realise as well. So that's all I'd say to all the participants here.
Okay, that's fine then. So yeah, okay, I'm going to give you all a 5-minute break then, just to recuperate, and then we'll come back. And what I'll do is I'll talk about personal statements. So it's a really kind of brief overview. It is tailored towards kind of perfecting a draft. So there might be some gaps if you're in year 12, like, actually, I don't understand how we've got here, like, what's the actual process for UCAS? That's fine. I'll answer any questions you have at the end. So the main thing here is about the do's and don'ts of writing and kind of how your personal statement should be structured. Okay. So 5 minutes then, guys, and I will see you back here on the hour. Okay, I'm back. Hopefully you are all too. So yeah, as I said before we took that 5-minute break, I'm now going to talk for 20 minutes or so on finalising your personal statement. So my main aim is to kind of recap the top tips when it comes to writing your personal statement and the potential pitfalls that some students do fall into when writing. So for those of you that have stayed on and haven't started your personal statement or are even really thinking about UCAS yet, these are some good top tips to kind of remember in advance of writing your personal statement in a year or so time. Okay, so the things I'm going to go through briefly, I'm going to go through the do's and don'ts of writing a personal statement, as I said, so the potential pitfalls that students fall into. There is also a video at the beginning of this, so it's about 3 minutes long. If you can't hear it, do bear with me, I'll put the closed captions on, but yeah, it's about 3 minutes, and I'm going to recap that video anyway. I'll then talk through structure. So if you're looking at your draft and you're like, I'm not sure if it flows properly or if I've used my evidence in the right place, this will be a good refresher for you. It's not set in stone. You don't have to do your personal statement this way. But if you're preparing to write a personal statement for next year, or you've written one and you're still not sure, this should be a good kind of refresher for you. And then I'll do a Q&A if you do have any questions at the end. But of course, feel free to ask them throughout and I'll try and get to them if I see them. Okay, so do's and don'ts first. As I said, there is a video now for 3 minutes, which I will share with you now. Is that shared? No. Sorry, 1 second. Here we go. I love this video. I always share this video when I talk about personal statements. So it's made by Which University, which is great. Again, going back to the question about, how do I decide which universities for me? Which university is really good if you're looking at different statistics on universities and just general advice as well. But this is made by different admissions tutors from across the country. So it's impartial advice and they tell students what they do and what they don't want to see within a personal statement. So if you have your draft, you might want to make some notes if you've done any of the don'ts. And you need to change that, you can do so. Or if you're thinking of writing a personal statement next year, you also might want to take some notes anyway. Don't panic if they mention loads of the don'ts and you've done them. I'll give you some advice and some alteration suggestions which you can make. So don't completely panic if you've done a couple of them, okay?
Your personal statement is your chance to tell the university or college you want to go to why you'd be great for their course. Every year, admissions tutors see thousands of personal statements. So how can you make yours stand out from the crowd?
The best personal statements tend to be ones where an applicant can effectively communicate to us and bring a sense of themselves to the applications.
I think the thing that really stands out with a personal statement is that the applicant has used evidence of their own achievements to support anything that they're saying about their ability.
And that's what I'm really looking for. I'm looking for richness, detail and evidence. Don't be ashamed of really being positive about yourself and your achievements.
more than anything, you're looking for an application that is truthful and sort of honest to the person.
I think the best thing is to see somebody who has a small amount of knowledge of the subject, really enjoys what they've understood.
What's important to remember is an opportunity for you to really shine and to promote yourself. What we don't want to see in a personal statement is any kind of negativity, whether that's regarding yourself and your achievements, or whether that's towards maybe a teacher or a tutor or somewhere else elsewhere.
Avoiding cliches in your personal statement is a good thing to do if you can do it.
My kind of pet hate is the cliche first sentence. So the classic computer science example I have is where a student says something to the effect of, I got my first computer when I was X years old. I'm not sure why they want me to know that, but it doesn't really demonstrate much.
It's almost a sort of quasi-joke of, ever since I was a fetus, I've always had a deep passion for medicine. And the reality of it is that that's probably not the case.
Almost every applicant appears to be passionate about whatever subject they've applied for. And of course it is important that they're enthusiastic about that subject, but how many teenagers do you know that usually use that kind of language to describe it? So it feels very false.
And the other thing is probably more for parents. We do find that sometimes parents really want to talk through their personal statement with their son or daughter, which is great, but when too much influence comes to bear and they start drafting it with them or indeed for them, we start hearing the voice of a 55-year-old rather than a 17-year-old, and actually we want to hear the voice of youth.
I would say also not to make a personal statement that's too abstract and quoting your favourite lines of poetry or various other bits of literature.
Personal statement should be a really, really positive document that really emphasises how good an applicant you are and what you've got to offer an institution.
But basically, being honest and drafting it well, taking time, being thoughtful, and those kinds of things are a really good basis for a personal statement.
Perfect. Hopefully you could all hear that, but if not, I'm going to now recap that for us anyway. So the first thing there was effective communication and use of evidence. So this is really, really important when you're writing a personal statement. Think back to your English and history classes where at GCSE where your teachers would tell you to write in point evidence analysis or point evidence explain. It's exactly the same thing when writing your personal statement. So have you given a good point? Have you given actual specific evidence for that point? And have you explained why that makes you a good candidate for university or that course? Why it makes you excited to do that course? Has it explained why you're interested in that course? So you have to make sure that you've explained the things that you've written and that you haven't just written off loads of just pieces of evidence without actually explaining them or telling us about yourself when you've explained them. Okay. Next one, be positive. Sounds really obvious, but a lot of the time students can fall into the trap of writing negative things without realizing. So you might start a sentence by saying, oh, I'm not really sure about, or I didn't really like this. Try and remove that and get straight into the positive point that you're trying to make, because if you write positively, you will sound more confident as well, and your work will be more concise, and you'll lose a lot of characters from removing the negativity as well. So remain positive. It also helps kind of demonstrate to the university that you are excited to do the course that you're applying to. Next one, be truthful. Again, should be kind of obvious, but you don't want to get caught in the trap if you're applying to a course which requires interview. So if you're applying to primary education here at St Mary's, you'll be interviewed. So on your personal statement, if you've written that you've done work experience but you haven't, you'll be caught out, and the chances are that you will lose that place or that offer at university. So remain truthful. Don't put down that you've, I don't know, coached a team of 20 but you haven't, for instance. Remain truthful. You don't want to lose a place at a university that you really want to go to. Show excitement for study. Again, demonstrate that you are really excited, that you are actually interested in the course that you're studying. So read through your draft if you've written one and look at the tone, are you excited to go to university? Make sure you have written that you're excited, essentially. And detail, the final one, and again comes back into effective communication, use of evidence. Talk in detail about the points that you're making. Don't just say, I'm a good team player, I'm independent, blah, blah, actually explain that stuff, give some specific examples. That's really, really important. On to the don'ts. First one, don't be negative. Of course, this is the opposite of be positive, but yeah, don't be negative. So don't, say, oh, I didn't like this teacher, or I hated sixth form, I hated college. And I completely appreciate that even right now, college can't be the funnest thing in the world. You're not in college. You're waiting at home, watching webinars. You might feel like not the happiest, and I completely appreciate that. I think back to my A-levels, and I can't say I enjoyed them particularly, but what I did was I thought specifically about topics and subjects that I did love. So have a think about the subject you're currently studying. Is there something particularly on that you enjoy and that you love? Can you talk about that specific thing like in detail? And actually that will just help you again with the use of evidence point. So yeah, it can be really hard to be super positive and to write positively about yourself. But yeah, just think back to something that you do enjoy. Be really specific if you can. Next one, don't mention universities or location by name. So if you're applying for 5 different universities, what you don't want to do is say, for example, I really want to study at St Mary's, because then you're excluding the 4 other universities that you've applied to. So make sure that you don't single out a university and that your personal statement is tailored to all the universities that you're applying to. That's really important. Same with location. So this depends. For me, because I applied for universities all in London, I had the liberty of obviously writing, I'm excited to go to London for X, Y, and Z reason, because it applied to all the universities I was applying to. But if you're planning on going to like Manchester, Winchester, Brighton, Scotland, all those different places, you don't want to again exclude a university by saying or pointing out one location. Okay. Next one, since a young age. Now, if you're sat there and you have started your personal statement with since a young age, or I've always been passionate about since the age of 6, don't worry. The top tip I normally give students who have done this and haven't realised that it's a commonly used phrase, if you look at the rest of your introduction, are there other lines and sentences that are really strong? So a lot of the time I'll read people's personal statements and their second line will be amazing. It'll be like, I love this specific subject, and they'll like use a specific example that's really, really good. And actually you can just get rid of that first line that says since a young age I've always been, and just get straight into the positive point about why you love that subject. So that's kind of my top tip there. Just have a look at what other strong sentences are in your introduction and just move around the words a bit. If you have any questions on that, or you'd like some advice, just drop me a Q&A question. But I'll have my email address up at the end of this video as well. So if you do want to email me across like a paragraph or your personal statement for comments, I'm happy to do that. But obviously as a deadline soon, I would recommend doing that as soon as possible. Okay, next one, make sure it's your own words. This is really important. Don't go onto Google and type in good personal statement openings for biology courses, for example, because chances are someone else has done that before. And UCAS has a plagiarism tracker. So plagiarism is where you copy somebody else's work, and essentially we will know if you've done that or not. The point here is normally universities will just decline your application if they've seen that you've copied it from somewhere. They might ask you to like go back and retry, but you want to get that offer in as soon as possible. So yeah, do not copy other people's words. The point they made in the video as well was that we don't want to hear your teacher, your parent, your carer, or your friend's voice. We want to hear yours. So it's important that you proofread your work, but make sure it's your own words and that your parent or carer, teacher, advisor doesn't write it for you. Okay. Last one, don't make it too abstract. This kind of comes back through to everything. So keep it simple, keep it concise, remain positive. Don't, use overcomplicated words. Just say what you mean, use good evidence, and you don't have to make it too abstract at all. We have a lot of personal statements that we need to read. So the simpler they are, the more to the point they are, the more concise they are, the better it is for us. Okay. So if you're over characters, have a look at like where you've used too many big words and just cut them down and be more simple and straightforward. Okay, so here are some potential pitfalls that you might fall into using those examples that I've just gone through. So have you used a thesaurus too much on your personal statement draft? Or do you currently do that too much anyway, for those of you who haven't yet written one? So a thesaurus is where you find a synonym or an alternative word to a word that you've already used. And a lot of students will do this to sound more intelligent or smarter if they think that they've been like really simple and need to use fancier words, which, as I've just said, isn't the case. You don't need to do that. So here's an original piece of text which reads, I remember how excited I was when my mother told me There was a kid my age moving into the old brick house, the one Mr. Bukowski died in. So if I took a thesaurus for this, it would read, I recall how energized I was when my matriarch informed me that as an adolescent, my maturity propelling into the aged brick dwelling, the one Mr. Bukowski expired in. Like, it just sounds over the top, and you wouldn't speak like this anyway in person. I wouldn't speak like that in person. So keep it simple, keep it to the point. It's funny for me, I like putting them on presentations, but you don't want to be, laughed at. It doesn't reflect well on you. So just keep it simple and don't go over the top with the thesaurus. Next one, exaggeration. This one was in the video. So I've wanted to be a doctor since I was in the womb. The chances are that isn't true. And we want to know about you in the present. Like, tell us about you now. Unless you have like a really, really relevant and good story from when you were younger, which is absolutely okay to use, and do use it, especially if it's specific to the degree that you're doing. Otherwise, don't exaggerate and just tell us like what you specifically love now. Plagiarism, as I said, there's a plagiarism tracker on UCAS. So how about you guys guess, if you can, in the Q&A box, if you want to, how many times this sentence was used word for word in 2015 UCAS applications, okay? So ever since I accidentally burnt holes in my pajamas after experimenting with a chemistry set on my 8th birthday, I've always had a passion for science. Does anyone want to guess how many times that was used as an opening sentence? Just type in a random number in the Q&A box. Anyone want to guess? Do you think it's in the hundreds or the thousands? No guesses? Okay, well, hopefully you've thought about it in your head. So if you were close, the answer is 234. So that is a lot of times for a word-to-word sentence to be used in a personal statement. So as I said before, if you've gone onto Google and you've typed in best opening sentence for whatever degree, make sure you change that as soon as possible, okay? Again, I'm happy to help with any opening sentences if you're really, really struggling. Here are just some examples of the most used opening sentences in 2018, published by UCAS. So I'll leave them there for you to look at quickly, but the most important thing here is that UCAS detected 4,559 plagiarized personal statements. So again, just a reminder that make sure it's your own words. Don't overthink it. Don't think, oh no, what if this is so common, I'll be flagged for plagiarism. It's not like that. We wouldn't decline you if you've used one sentence that someone else happens to use. It's more like if you've copied a whole thing. And with this, it's just about being original. So you might have used one of these sentences, but you're not going to get declined for using one of these sentences. It's more about, okay, we've read this sentence a lot. How can you make yourself stand out from the crowd? Okay. So again, a lot of them are based around your younger life. But again, think about the present. Like, what are you doing right now that can make your personal statement stand out a bit differently to others? Final potential pitfall, you've probably seen this before. So it's let's eat grandma, or let's eat grandma, two very different meanings. So again, make sure a parent, a carer, a teacher, a friend, advisor, whoever reads your personal statement, like proofreads it, but make sure you write it yourself, okay? Right, next and finally, I'm now going to do a recap on structure of personal statements. As I said previously, this isn't set in stone. You don't have to do it this way, but if you're struggling, this should be a good refresher for you. So I've written here that your introduction should be 10% of your personal statement. So it should say, why do you want to study the course? What interests do you have in the subject area? And what aspirations do you have further to university study? So you might not know what you want to do after university, and that's okay. But this is also your chance to be specific about what you're excited to study in the future on your course. So think about it that way. But yeah, it should be a short paragraph, nothing too complex, just straight to the point with those three things in it. The next two, I haven't put any percentages on them specifically, as it varies from course to course. So if you're doing a practical course or a course which requires that you have work experience before going into it, you would probably write more about your work experience, employment, or volunteering. So you would write about any skills you've gained from the work experience or volunteering that will prepare you for university level study. So if you're going into like physical education teaching and you've done some work placements in a school, you'll obviously write about that a lot. Or if you're going into coaching or rehab and you've done some like work at a physiotherapist, you'd obviously talk about that because it's specific to the degree. For all other things, if you don't have work experience like that, talk the most about your academic achievements. So what academic achievements and experience do you have that prepare you for university level study in your chosen subject? And do you have any further reading in your subject of interest? So yeah, have a think about what you're currently studying at college or sixth form, and yeah, how can you relate that to the degree that you're going on to study? And that should be your biggest section if you don't have any relevant work experience or extracurricular activities. But if you're doing practical degrees, you normally would maybe talk a bit more about the practical elements of like your experience, and that's absolutely okay, which is why there's no percentages here. If you have any questions about whether you've weighted your evidence correctly for the course that you're applying to, just ask me and I'll let you know. If you're running out of characters and now you're like, oh, maybe I should write some more about my academic achievements or work experience, have a look at your extracurricular activities. I put here 20%, like it doesn't even need to be that big. A lot of the time students will fall into the trap of kind of just listing off loads of evidence at once in this paragraph. So they'll be like, I play football, therefore I'm a good team player, but not actually explain why that makes them good for university. So if you've just written loads and loads of different pieces of evidence, do you need them all? Have you already explained why that's used for university, like in previous paragraphs? So that's sometimes a good one to cut down, unless, of course, you're talking specifically about the degree that you're applying to, and you remember to put point evidence analysis. Why is this point that I just made proving that I'm a good candidate for university level study? Okay. And finally, the conclusion. So 10%, if you haven't got a conclusion yet, it should be about 1 or 2 sentences, can be really brief. And all you need to write is basically, why should you be offered the place? Like, why are you the most, like the best candidate? Why should you be offered like a place on the course? Remember what admission students are looking for and leave them with a good impression. So I didn't have time today to go through kind of like everything that we look for, but the main things are that you're excited about going to university and that you're prepared to go to university. Have you written those things, and can you summarize that in the final 2 sentences of your personal statement, essentially? Okay. If you want to see this again, or you want any resources on personal statement structure, I can send them around to Adrian and James and make sure they're sent out to you if that's useful. Okay. Does anyone have any final questions? It can be on personal statements or anything that I've previously spoken about in this presentation. I've put my email address up on the screen in case you do have a personal statement draft and you're now terrified after what you've heard. Firstly, don't be. And secondly, please feel free to send to me and I'll happily look it over for you and offer you some feedback or advice, or feel free to ask me any questions here. I think there's 4 of you left. Do any of you have any questions? Or Adrian and James have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Just that was absolutely brilliant. Thanks, Meg. That was really good. Even I kind of wish I had a talk like that before I went to university. So yeah.
Me too. Okay, perfect. Well, like I said, my email address is right on the screen. If any students do have any questions, please do you let them have my email address. Schools and colleges is a shared inbox, so